Like we would go to Camp Hero on a school visit, on a field trip, and we would be separate from the other kids. They would take us separate sometimes and bring us to places where they weren't going. And they had the hatchways. They would ask you, are you ready? One time they asked me, do you want to go down there? And I was scared once when I was really small. I was like, no, I don't want to go down there.
So they singled out a group?
Yeah.
They took you to Camp Hero?
Yeah.
When they said we're going on a trip today, whatever this field trip was, what did they say? Do you remember what they said?
The lighthouse. It was the lighthouse, yeah, but Camp Hero's right there, a quarter mile away. We would walk over there, People died in the name of science. Thousands of kids died in this program out of fear. They were scared to death. I have no reason to lie about any of this, and anybody that doesn't believe it, they're gonna think we're all crazy anyway. It really doesn't matter to me, and I don't really care.
The following motion picture is an honest documentation of a long investigation regarding the bizarre occurrences at the Camp Hero Air Force Base. This is a tale of several men who claim that they were unwilling participants and survivors of an extraordinary evil, which allegedly happened in Montalk, New York, between January of 1971 and August 12, 1983. The interviews and the men who appear in them are real. They are not actors. As there are no artifacts, photographs, and no available evidence of their claims, the stories are further illustrated here for you as cinema. The purpose of this picture is neither to prove or disprove the Montauk legends, but to simply and carefully raise questions. The choice that remains is yours. Our world is filled with mysteries. Minds filled with wonder thrive upon tales of what may exist in the skies above us, the land that surrounds us, or in the deep, dark seas below. Paranormal mysteries are typically harmless lures that stimulate the wild imaginations of the young, those with bright and curious minds. However, there are mysteries of a far different nature. They strike terror into the hearts of grown men and women who dare to explore. Is it possible that there is some truth in the tales of madmen? Truth in stories of extraterrestrial beings, or perhaps even other dimensions? Or maybe there's truth in the tales of a dark tower by the sea, and all of the awful things that happened there. These are the chronicles of cold visitors from space and the evil of man. On a bright May afternoon, a peculiar dense fog rolls onto land from the Atlantic Ocean. Like a ghostly veil, the mist slowly covers the town. "5 miles from town, at the very edge of the coast, looms an archaic radar tower. A rusted giant with a long history. Approximately 120 miles east of New York City rests the small and remote town of Montalk. Its name was inherited from the Montauk Indians, who were settlers of the land for over 4,000 years. From as far back as the Revolutionary War, it was a place of interest for military forces. Montauk has equally attracted vacationers. In the summer, it's a thriving village, with barely a vacancy in its oceanfront hotels and resorts. In the winter, it's nearly a ghost town. A place of comfort and happiness for most who visit, but there are others who claim that Montauk is the place where unimaginable horrors occurred. Above the seemingly perfect American small town lurks the AN/FPS-35 radar tower, a 70-ton relic of United States Air Force history. On official record, Camp Hero, which was originally Fort Hero, was built in 1942. It was primarily used by the U.S. Air Force during the Second World War. Time seems to stand still for those who spend years of their lives investigating the legends of Camp Hero. What might begin as a hobbyist's archaeological dig could gradually become an unhealthy obsession. For Christopher Garetano, half a decade of Montauk analysis became an all-consuming essay.
If you should ever decide to research the legends of Camp Hero, there are two things that you'll notice shortly after you begin. The first is that both the clock and calendar will gradually lose their meaning as you go along. The second is that there's a very fine line between fairy tales and fact. I can tell you now that in the beginning I had no clue of what I was really getting myself into. I thought it would be a simple investigation into one of Earth's lesser-known paranormal conspiracy theories. It wasn't until about a year or so into the project that I realized I was terribly wrong. I'll elaborate on this throughout the movie. Like most of you, my attraction to the mysteries of the unknown began when I was a kid. I read every book on the subject that I can get my hands on, and I watched every movie. I also had this reoccurring dream of an alien spacecraft crash landing in the woods behind my childhood home. In my waking hours, I would pretend that the neighborhood was quarantined, so that the wreckage could be concealed by secret government agents. I had a wild imagination as a kid, and I was infamous in my neighborhood for telling stories, one of which was of a voluptuous spacewoman appearing in my backyard and then quickly disappearing. When I decided to make this movie, I entered with that same childhood fascination. A strange tale of Nazi scientists, government black operations, and extraterrestrial horrors is right up my alley. But in this case, there are several men who claim that it's all true. And there are thousands of followers around the world who hold a strong allegiance to their claims. I read everything there was to read about the project, but it was usually biased, either immediately declaring it a hoax or supporting the stories without any discretion. My first instinct to seek some kind of evidence naturally pointed towards Camp Hero. Like any proper investigation, before a conclusion is drawn, my goal was to gather as much first-hand information as possible. The basic tools of the trade were a combination of my movie-making equipment and essential devices for urban exploration. I wasn't sure what I was going to find at Camp Hero. I was hoping that somewhere, deep inside this now-defunct Air Force relic, the proverbial ghosts of the Montalk Project would speak to me. I also decided to ask an old friend of mine to join me on a good deal of this journey. I met Eric Swanson back in film school, and he was the person who first introduced me to the Montauk legends in 1998. We share a common interest in the mysteries of the world, and Eric is a grounded person with a healthy amount of skepticism. These are crucial traits to possess when investigating a legend like the Montauk Project.
Eric Swanson is an artist residing in New York City. His work, as Eric proposes, is a statement against corruption and lies.
Unfortunately, there's a good deal of people who don't mistrust the government. I think that, mistrust in the government is a completely rational behavior, and I encourage it. No one should trust the government. Throughout history, numerous governments have abused their power, have deceived their, the citizens at large, and it's absurd for any government or any population on the planet today to assume that their government is any different. Anytime there's a large news event, you get all sorts of people on the internet who, they don't just ask questions, they jump to conclusions that are, in my opinion, most of the time wildly imaginative and have no basis in fact.
We first met with Camp Hero researcher and Montauk local, Mr. Paul Fagan. He spent several years observing and documenting every accessible inch of the base, and he knew ways for us to examine locations that were otherwise difficult to reach.
Don't do anything illegal. Beware of the eagle that's right in the middle of your back. Don't be illegal.
One of the more interesting things on the exterior surface were a good number of entrances to the underground. Paul claimed that most of them once led to a large and elaborate tunnel system. We couldn't confirm this information, as all of them were either flooded with water or deliberately sealed with cement.
I think it went into this bunker itself.
The holy grail of this expedition was the Sage radar tower. Paul knew a way for us to get inside, and as I expected, most of the interior was falling apart. Each level was accessible by staircase. However, the stairs didn't lead to a lower level or basement, and there was clearly an elevator shaft that went down.
I got to see where you begin. I got to see your ID, my friend. Every time I go to the store.
There were remnants of obsolete Air Force technology on every level. The place was a historical catacomb, one part military ghost and combination haven for urban explorers and bored teenagers.
Take the face off this, leave the difference from the number.
After searching for the better part of an hour, we heard voices coming from a lower level.
You heard that, right?
The tower, by law, was off limits, so to avoid an encounter with the authorities, we left in a hurry. The last thing I wanted was to be arrested on the first day of my investigation. I can't tell you that my singular purpose in this investigation was to prove that the Montauk experiments actually happened. I was searching for some kind of clue that would lead us to evidence that would either support or debunk the many tales that came from this place. Finding evidence is certainly not as easy as some might lead you to believe, and I wasn't interested in wasting time. I chose to avoid several things during my investigation, one of which was the Air Force. I certainly don't believe that the Air Force would confess to running the Montauk Project or any other elaborate experiment that they've been accused of conducting. Many have naively suggested that I should break ground at Camp Hero for the purpose of proving the existence of the underground base. Let's say there was a secret base down there. Considering that it's top secret government property, I don't think I would get very far without a few dangerous obstacles. I went forward with the best plan of action possible, to travel to and to speak at length with the very men who originated the stories, and I trusted that much could be learned by asking the right questions, watching and listening carefully.
Deep in southern Florida, beyond the Everglades, resides a lonely man with a past that's shrouded in mystery. His name is Alfred Bielik. He claims he was once a program director of the Montauk experiments before reluctantly having his memories stolen from him.
Where did the humans on Earth come from? This is one of the big speculations, one of the big speculating points which scientists can't answer. You've got the two groups, the ones are the religious creationists, and then of course you have the ones in the scientific circles who say it's all a matter of evolution. All of the species breed through, humans, animals, whatever. It doesn't explain how whole species changed and how as they say, species came up out of the ground, so to speak. All of the evidence is otherwise. Now, who created the human race? Who put us all here? That's another story.
Upstate New York is where one can find the isolated mountain laboratory of Mr. Preston Nichols. Isolation is something well known to take its toll on any man's sanity. However, Preston insists that what we might call hallucination is indeed his dark reality.
I always was different. I was a technical geek. In school I had an officially recorded IQ of 200 plus because that's as high as those tests went. I was called in on some of the reverse engineering projects of technology picked up out there, from crashed ET objects. The technology in that camera right there is from the aliens, no question. Because in the last 50 years, for the last 400 or 500 years, we went asymptotic to the bottom curve, and all of a sudden the last 50 years it went straight up like that. That's not normal. That's not normal in the regression of a society. Somebody had to come in at this turning point and give us the information to make the technology go up almost tangentially to the curve.
St. Joseph, Michigan is the home of Stuart Swerdlow and his family, a former Montauk boy. Stuart claims to have been abducted and abused by the proprietors of the Montauk experiments when he was a child.
I learned very quickly that most people aren't interested in what I experienced, nor would they believe me. And so there were times I would tell other children, because children accept a lot of things. but they thought it was a story that I made up. And so I just learned to be quiet. I didn't tell anybody for the longest time. I must have been well into my adulthood before I even discussed it with anybody. Even with people I was married to, I never discussed in detail because I didn't want to be ridiculed anymore.
A common device used in any good mystery is sometimes referred to as a MacGuffin. In the case of a proper murder yarn, the MacGuffin may be a deadly weapon, or an ancient idol that drives a dark assassin to commit his evil deeds. For all parties who have searched the annals of Camp Hero, the MacGuffin is simply the truth. Like a ghost piece missing from a large puzzle, it's the truth that curious investigators and storytellers alike either covet or guard with their lives. The men you see before you swear that the Montalk legends are true. They have been challenged and ridiculed for their claims more often than not. When asked to present solid, tangible evidence, they are unable. It's only their stories that we have to consider.
As of now, our only evidence is the way the tales are told. A lot can be discovered in a person's countenance if you're watching the details. I won't interfere with your observations by explaining my own at the moment, but I suggest you listen and pay close attention to not only the stories, but the subject's reactions and body language, voice inflection, and facial expression.
My family moved to Long Island in 1970, and it was the summer of 1970 that one afternoon on a weekend, my father said, well, let's go out to Montalk Point. And that was the first time I remember hearing that name, Montalk Point. And we drove out there, and I remember passing the base, and in those days there was an old fighter jet that they had placed in the front of the gates. And I remember my father said, oh, that's the Montauk Air Force Base. And as we passed it, I got this thing in my head, and I said, I know it's in there. I know it's underneath there. Now, I don't know why I thought that, and even at the time I thought that's a strange thing to be thinking right now. But I did think that. I knew something was going on there. I never pressed anybody to believe me or understand me. I didn't know that I could. I grew up in a family of a culture where you just didn't do those things.
Can you tell me a moment that made you happy? Can you recall like a really good time?
I was never happy in my life. There was not one day that I could say, wow, that was a really good day. I was really happy. Not one. I remember sometimes such waves of deep depression came over me. I just didn't want to be here anymore. My life was horrible. You know, there was no peace day or night. I don't know which one I feared more, the day or the night. I was always afraid of the dark. I was afraid to go outside even in the daylight. I could not sleep alone. I'd wake up screaming. I'd have to have someone come in and stay with me. I would see what I now know to be alien beings in my room, or I'd be taken to places which I now know to be underground, into a tunnel system. It was abject fear and horror. And I remember on one occasion, I actually found a rope or a belt or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. I thought, you know, I don't want to live in this life anymore, because it was just too difficult. And I put it around my neck, and I pulled it as tight as I can, thinking I would suffocate. But, you know, when you do such a thing, there's a reflex that stops you from completing it. And so I couldn't. And I said, how do people commit suicide? I hear people hang themselves and do these things. And I couldn't understand how they did it. And so I tried it a couple of times, obviously without success. So I thought, well, I must have a reason for being here, but I don't want to be here because my life is very different than those people I know in high school.
You had to have some balancing ritual, something that made you feel better. What did you do to feel better at that time?
I suppose the only thing that comforted me or made me feel like I wasn't alone was when I would see shows like Star Trek or Lost in Space or Twilight Zone. When I'll say, okay, there's a story about things I believe in or things I've experienced, so someone else is thinking about it too. So perhaps when I watched those shows or read a book about those things, that was the only comfort I had. If you could consider it comfort, I just felt then I wasn't completely alone.
As a child, did you question your own sanity? Did you ever say, hey, maybe I'm seeing these things, maybe there's something wrong with me? Did you ever feel that way at all?
When I was a child, again, I never realized that there was a normal or not normal. There was just existence, and people were just the way they were. If you were crazy, you wound up in an institution back then. There was no psychologist, there was no psychiatrist per se. You know, if you were nuts, you went in a hospital and stayed there. But in my situation, having bad dreams, weird experiences, knowing that something wasn't right, that was just I was an odd child. That's the category that I would be put on. He's just very odd. A typical abduction experience that I had as a child, and they did change as I got older. But as a small child, it would always begin with these type of shadows that would appear on the wall of my room. In those days, we had metallic blinds on the windows. They would start to vibrate, or the windows would start to tap or move. And I would get the sensation that I wasn't alone. That something was watching me. Something was going to come in my room. I just knew it. I can't explain. It was a knowing. I just knew it was going to happen. Be paralyzed. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. All I could do was feel them levitating me, and sometimes I'd actually feel my body lifting off the bed, and I would literally float out through the window. And then the next thing I knew, I was surrounded by beings. Sometimes they were small, sometimes they were tall, but they were not human. They had what I now know to be alien features. And then I'd be placed on a table, strapped down, or felt like clamped down. I couldn't move my arms or my legs. I knew I was naked. And then I would feel things on my body, probes, needles, pressure. Sometimes it would feel like there was a hand inside of my body touching my organs. Bright lights above me so that I couldn't see who was standing or what was standing around me. And I remember basically fear. I was constantly afraid. The so-called little gray aliens were used in the beginning to abduct people and bring them. But I can tell you that the little grays are a manufactured race. They're not a natural species. They are nothing more than human fetuses grown to larger position and mind-controlled. There was generally paralysis, fear, and pain. I'd say those were the three general constants in the experiences. Each experience was different. Sometimes I would be put back in my room and several hours had passed. And sometimes it felt like a few minutes. And as I got older and I became involved in what I now know to not be alien but human experimentations, then it was days and weeks and months. But they were able to bend time so that they would put you back almost to the time they took you. But mentally I knew I had experienced a very long time away. And so when I would become aware of the date and time, it didn't make sense to me because I knew I had just had an experience that was way longer than what the clock said I had experienced. When these events would happen at night, yes, I would very often try to fight back, but the issue was, once I became aware of what was happening, my body was paralyzed. I couldn't move except for my head and my eyes. And sometimes I would try to scream and nothing would come out of my mouth.
If you could have stopped it, would you have? Would you have, if there was a switch you could shut off, would you have stopped this thing from happening at night?
My biggest desire was to stop these events from happening every night, or at least several times per week. And so, yeah, nighttime and sleep time were my enemies. I feared them.
When darkness falls over Montauk, the town is silent. The few that venture out into the night are isolated to local pubs. However, in the 1970s, when the town was sleeping, evil is said to have been wide awake beneath the surface of Camp Hero. One of the most sinister aspects of the Montalk Project is known as the Montalk Boys Program, a brutal experiment designed to dominate the minds of its victims.
We don't know for sure who actually ran it, because it was not listed on any of the books of the military or government.
The German scientists who had been taken around the bypassed through the Nuremberg, they never went to Nuremberg in the Nuremberg trials. They were bypassed into the U.S. straight to the Brookhaven National Laboratories and worked there for 20 years until they were kicked out by Congress. And then they looked for a new home and they found it at Montalk.
At that point, that's when it became literally a black secret project, because the idea of mind control at that time was not popular with Congress. So it had to be moved to where it could be totally a secrecy. Montauk Air Force Base was selected because it was at that time a sleepy little fishing village, and the project could be hidden out there.
They wanted a large number of programmed boys to be used for mind control operations.
The Montauk Boys program, basically, what they were doing, they would pick up boys, young men, off the street and take them to this facility.
And it started by picking them up off the streets around Long Island, then New York. Lost kids, left home, living off the streets, do anything for a living to make a few bucks.
Teens, prostitutes, foster children, children of drug addicts, whomever was considered expendable, and no one would miss them. But they would also have scouting missions in cities and other locations. They knew the type of genetics they were looking for, and if they saw someone that matched those genetics and that person was easily grabbable, they would take that person. water dripping down this cement wall, concrete block wall, rock, depending on what room I was in.
Were the words Montalk spoken down in that base?
No. I didn't know where it was. Sometimes they would throw you in a cement room and they would hit you with a wooden pole, or they would take some kind of metal rod and hit you with it. There were a number of different people that would administer the tortures, experiments, programming, etc. They were not always the same person, so that I would not develop any kind of relationship with them, and they would not feel a relationship with me. I wouldn't call them handlers particularly. I think some of them were just kind of automatons. They were sometimes soldiers. They looked like soldiers. Sometimes they looked like ordinary people off the street. I never knew what to expect, and they were always different. They're always male, never female that would do these kinds of things.
The beatings were the most horrible. And the fact that they were doing it without the approval of the kids. You know, it was literally kidnapping.
One thing they loved to do was drown you, hold you underwater to the point where you were about to give up.
They wanted to split the mind. They wanted to shatter the mind. And then they would program each individual piece for something else.
But what was the intention on the beatings and the drownings? That must have...
That was to shatter the mind even further.
So they can manipulate it.
Yes, they can manipulate it.
The psyche of the person, to install programming, to fracture the mind pattern, is to make you uncomfortable. Because when you're, first you're cold, then you're hot, then you're cold, and the mind doesn't know what to expect, and after a while it fractures.
They'd leave a few pieces to be their normal awake mind, and then they would program the buried pieces. And then it was my responsibility to put them all back together again. So the programming is safe behind the trauma block. Now, if you're going to remove the programming, you got to remove that trauma block. And the idea there was, you going to go into your own horror world? No, of course not.
Okay, when you take a personality and you fragment it into pieces, they take one of the pieces and then they develop it into a sub-personality or a related personality, which is a little different than the core personality. And then they provide a code that triggers that personality to come forward and take control of the body. They were programmers, not handlers or controllers, but programmers who would only come into the room after I had been sedated, drugged, beaten. I was pretty much immobile, just laying there on the table fastened down, and then the programmers would come in. Then they would put the lights over the table, then they would fasten things to different parts of my body, particularly my head area. There were so many different types of rituals that involved astral entities, but one of them was to create the child as a vessel, so that the entity could enter the body of the child and animate it, and then those participating in the ritual would achieve the energy of that entity that was occupying the body. There would be a chemical type of smell. They would put things in my arms, in my legs, in my genitals, in my head, and then I would hear input voices over and over and over again, and then there'd be like this swirl. I would see this swirling vortex over my visual perception. All the time I would hear mental voices telling me to be calm and it was okay and that I would be all right and not to fight them. You would get to a point where you just didn't even care anymore because you couldn't even feel the pain anymore. I think that was a form of dissociation. And that's what they wanted. They wanted you to dissociate, fracture the mind. That's how the programming begins.
I did see a couple of their sessions. It was disgusting, made me sick.
Can you describe a little bit of that?
I would just as soon die.
The amazing things that they could think of to create fear, anxiety, and fracturing. I don't know how human beings could even think up such things, but they did. And so, if you survived, maybe you weren't so lucky if you survived. Definitely, I did see people die. I saw animals being murdered. I saw people being murdered. I saw rapes of all kinds. And I suppose the idea was to desensitize from those things so that if you were programmed to do any of that, it wouldn't make you feel one way or another. It would be completely neutral to you because you'd been so downloaded with this for so many times. It was no more different than washing your hands.
What was their purpose behind using children? What was the idea behind it for the people that had no idea?
Using children was extremely important because they were innocent and they had extreme fear. The pineal gland excretes a chemical called adrenochrome, and this is a body enhancer, a mind enhancer, a mood enhancer that the Illuminati and the elite use, which is extremely powerful if extracted when a person is at the height of fear. Depending on the kind of programming that they were going to use a particular person for, depending on that person's mind pattern and genetics, they would use drugs like LSD because they were trying to find the combination that would create an altered state that allowed easy downloading of the programming. Some of it was thanks to the Nazis. Some of it was thanks to some alien groups that had been doing this for millions of years.
Fox, butterfly, snake.
So when they take a child who is more afraid than an adult in most situations, and they bring them to a state of extreme fear, and at that moment they sacrifice them, then they immediately extract the adrenochrome from the pineal gland, and that was more valuable to them than gold. that's when you would be extracted immediately, and the programmer who would be doing this to you would tell you, I saved your life, I am your new God, and you must behave and listen to me always. We were told that what was going on there was for the benefit of humanity, that humanity was unable to take care of itself, basically because people were violent, evil, and stupid, to cut it to the bottom line. And so what they were doing was helping to control society so that civilization could continue without being destroyed. They said the pain and the suffering that you experience will actually save mankind. And that's what we were imprinted with.
Eventually I went to him and I says, look, what you're doing is stupid. You get the kids, you want to get the kids to cooperate voluntarily. Here's what I suggest you do. And I had to go up through, I don't know how many levels upstairs above John Pruitt to the second in command of the entire operation, who was a civilian, but he had the authority. I went to him and I says, look, this is what I propose you do to get the cooperation of the Montalk boys. Instead of forcing them into this, give them a carrot. Give them something in exchange for their services and allowing you to program them.
And of course it evolved into a more humane way of doing it. They were set out, put back in the public as like Manchurian candidate soldiers. They could be activated at any time. And we figure there's at least 100,000 of them done around the country.
Nobody was sure of exactly what the Montauk boys trained for. Many of them were used as spies. It was like Mata Hari, except it was a male. And that was a major part of the program. There's another major part of the program which was swept under the rug, was a lot of the kids were psychics, and they descended on this and trained them as psychics to engage in psychic warfare, and this is where some of the problems have come from in the military since.
Most of them were being programmed as some sort of a psi, a psi PSY soldier. You can program sections of the mind to heighten the psi ability that they have. Everyone has psi abilities.
Have you ever seen these before?
No.
These were invented by a man named Carl Renner way back in the 1930s. They were designed to test the powers of the mind.
Like a memory test?
Not exactly. See, you were brought here because you're very special. And these cards are intended to test something that goes way beyond any rudimentary memory skills. There are parts of the mind that you can use that most would never dream of. I want you to take a good look at these symbols. And then in a moment, I'm going to shuffle them again. And then I'm going to ask you which card I'm holding in my hand. Okay? I want you to do this immediately, without thinking about it. Do you have any questions?
No, I think I understand.
You know, to assure you're not thinking too hard about these cards, I think I'm going to play some music. I find that it relaxes you and allows you to be more spontaneous when an image comes to your mind. This music is something before your time. In fact, before my time. So let's begin.
There are rogue groups within the government, naval intelligence being one, but not the only one, and I want to make it very clear, I am not blaming naval intelligence as a whole. I'm not condemning naval intelligence as a whole. There's some very good people in there. But they have a rogue group, which are these Montalk kid types who are going to the dark side and are going into the black arts. If you don't think that's real, you better do your homework. It is very real. Our masters, and who knows how much of this comes from alien knowledge and alien help, I don't know, but I suspect some of it does. But they can manipulate a person's mind, their psyche, their nervous system, cause a total collapse of the nervous system on command. This is part of the, shall we say, the broadened area, the larger area of Montalk and what it led to.
What are you scared of? I mean, I haven't let you down, have I? You don't think I would let anything happen to you or anything go wrong, do you? This mission is gonna change things forever.
Stargate sequence configuration start. Launch start in T-minus 5 seconds.
My own estimation, there were thousands of people that were lost in these experimentations. Sometimes they would send them back in time or future into time, and they never came back. The one Stargate that I used looked like a mirror. And I remember being flat on my back on, I guess it was some kind of table or slab, and then the next thing I knew, I almost like became part of it. I just was in it.
This mission is gonna change things forever. Forget the streets. Your streets are gonna be paved with gold. Everything is waiting after we do
For the next 1,000 years, setting out for the great unknown.
As you may know from other research, the human body has its own biorhythms. So does the planet Earth. The planet Earth has a whole series of biorhythms, but it has 4 principal ones. Those patterns of 4 overlapping biorhythms peak out and create a very strange electronic synchronization pattern, which the aliens knew all about, but we knew nothing about at that time. Long-distance wormhole operations. They helped us to understand that. It says, you know about time travel, but you don't know how to build a system which will combine time travel and space travel. Says, we can do that for you. Well, the government was elated. They said, happily, yes, sure, fine.
Every point in time and space has a unique set of coordinates vibration. And so when you know the target zone of where you want to go, and there is that reference of vibrational energy, and then you take what you want to send and you match it identically to the rate of vibration of the target, there's instant connection. So we would get the coordinates, we would get the frequency rate of vibration of that particular zone of space, and then by thinking about it, the psychic on the chair would tap in mentally to that vibration, and he would create the energy connection between his point A and point B, the target zone.
Stargate sequence configuration start. Biorhythm coordinates 314. Europa.
And that's how civilizations are able to go through billions of light years in space and time instantly.
After years of brutal experimentation, Stuart Swerdlow claims to have been recruited for several missions to travel back in time, where he extracted DNA samples for the purpose of cloning historical as well as biblical figures. With technology given by extraterrestrials, time as well as interstellar and interdimensional travel was possible. Alfred Bielek claimed to have traveled to the planet Mars on several occasions, where he witnessed ancient structures and artifacts from a previous civilization.
Basically, the government would take alien technology, they would be taught how to use it, and then they would re-engineer it to other things. And the aliens knew about these things, and I think sometimes they purposely kind of gave us a rope to hang ourselves, and sometimes they were curious to see what we would develop with it.
They, convince the government to do what they want by saying, we'll give you great technologies, which they have.
Now, I have to say that when this technology was given, many coordinates were provided with it. But if we wanted to go someplace that the alien civilization didn't tell us about, we had to find those coordinates. And so it was experimental. We knew basically what the frequency was in that zone of space, but we didn't know the specifics. For whatever reason, the honing device that would connect them didn't work. Or sometimes it broke in the transmission. Sometimes we didn't know what happened. And so they were lost.
And how did you feel? I mean, you witnessed some of these children, other children being lost in these experiments. How did you feel when you saw them go away and not come back? I mean, were you afraid that this was going to happen to you?
I never developed emotional connection to anybody there. So I saw so many people come and go. It was like, you see the grass in the summertime and then it's covered up in snow in the winter and then there's new grass. It's like, didn't make a difference. They were there and they weren't there. And so I know that sounds harsh, but that's the way it was, and you have to have an experience to understand that.
What would you say to the people who these children were kidnapped and murdered and you were a part of it, what would you tell them? If they said, well, you know, they're trying to say, well, you were part of this. You approved of this. What would you
I
tell
did approve of it, but there was nothing I could do about it.
How would they dispose of the bodies? Would there be a crematorium in Montalk? How were the children disposed of? The ones that were killed, how would they dispose of the bodies?
Truthfully, I have no idea. I never witnessed how they disposed of the bodies. I was told several different things. One, that they were burned. One, that they were put in a room and lime was thrown over them to decompose them. I was also told they were dumped in the ocean or weighted down. All kinds of different stories. So truthfully, I don't know how they disposed of the bodies, but they did dispose of them.
Scared? You? Come on, man, you're the bravest kid I know. You think I would let anything go wrong? That I would let anything hurt you? I wouldn't let anything hurt you in any way. You've made it, kid. Everything is waiting for you after this. Everything will be coming your way. No more fear. I've been keeping it a big surprise. This one is serious. And we have you set for life. Do you understand that? Set for the rest of your life.
I was told that over the 13 years of the project, there were as many as 300,000 that were used in the experimentation. Of that amount, I was told less than 1% survived, and of that less than 1%, very few were able to function in society.
How many do you think in that period of time, let's say between, what was it, 1971, roughly?
72,
72 to
maybe
83?
80.
So how many do you think, approximately?
Probably at Montalk itself, at least 10,000.
Between a minimum figure of 10,000 and a possible maximum figure of 100,000. Because Long Island was not the only point where they were brainwashing these kids and setting up the Montauk Boys programs. Eventually they wound up in every major city in the U.S.
That's actually a small number. Do you know that in this day and age, that there are over 5 million people a year that vanish off the face of the earth without a trace? So 300,000 over the course of 13 years is quite insignificant.
Let's put it this way. If you're sitting there with 20 guns pointed at you, what are you going to do? Whatever the hell they want! First of all, I have the self-preservation instinct, like every one of us has. And getting shot hurts. I can tell you that from personal experience. And I don't want to be hurt. If you're going to kill me, okay, kill me, you son of a bitch. I bore fear being hurt and laying in a hospital for years in pain.
So, in other words, you were forced to do this. This was against your will.
Initially, it wasn't. But I really had no way out of it.
The final moments of the Camp Hero experiments, according to its reluctant members, were rooted in the defiance of a mysterious program director, Mr. Jack Pruitt.
I had very little to do with Jack Pruitt. I guess the closest was at the end when he pulled a gun on me and told me to go cut apart the transmitter to shut it down. He was a lieutenant, the first lieutenant that was listed on all the paperwork as being in charge of the Montalk Air Force Station.
Preston Nichols and several surviving members claim to have met here at the Memory Motel to devise a plan that would inadvertently end the project for good.
Now, the original focus was to generate a field that would control the way the general population would think and act. That's what they wanted. They wanted mind control into the mass population. So we all decided the project was going in a very bad direction and we wanted to crash it.
That's when you just realized this thing has got to be shut down and destroyed no matter how we do it. It's got to be stopped, or everything's out of control. As you realize the consequences of this expanding to another level.
Initialize sequence start. Generate sequence level 14.
You sure you're okay with this? I'm gonna get started.
Begin sequence level 14 in T minus 5 seconds.
The Montalk chair, which many people have read about and heard about, was Sirius A technology. It was able to download thoughts from anyone sitting in that chair, store it into a computer, amplify it, and broadcast it to a specific person, place, or thing.
At the output of the computer, you had the digital representation of that concept that the chairperson was thinking about. If he was thinking about this remote control, as complete as this is in his mind, the digital output of the main computer system could, in the virtual world, model this exactly. If he had the whole thing, all the information was there to literally create this thing.
There was a psychic by the name of Duncan Cameron who was one of the ones used, and many of us boys who were in our early teens at the time were used energetically to boost him while he was in the chair.
The Montalk project was basically a mind amplifier or a wish machine. And I remembered the movie Forbidden Planet with the monsters from the Inn. So what I wanted to have done, and we all agreed, was for Duncan to materialize something like that, even though it wasn't fully physical. It would scare the bejesus out of the out of the top people, and they'd shut it down. But we actually got something physical and real.
Jack, you don't hear that?
This one's from Africa, the Dark Continent. It's the birthplace of all life on Earth. Or so they've told us for centuries now.
Jack!
You said.
The system is on overload.
Well, looks like you're going to have to do something about it.
Do what?
It looks like you're going to have to cut the wave guides to the main power.
Do you have any idea what's happening above us? I wouldn't make 10 yards. Level 6 and 7, it's all gone. If it keeps cycling like this.
There's a reason why you were chosen for your position, Mr. Nichols, and why I was chosen for mine. I've commanded all kinds of brave men. Men that knew they were gonna die, yet they went forward without an ounce of defiance.
Jack, don't do it.
This is what keeps man from becoming obsolete. Do you realize that?
Don't you do it, Jack.
Fine. Try me.
So Pruitt comes into play. And what did he do to get you to go?
Pulled a gun on me. At that time, I didn't know to stick my finger in the end. Okay, you son of a bitch, pull the trigger.
And he says, you want me to go in there? I said, yes. You are going in there. He said, I don't think so. And Pruitt pulls out a 45 and aims it at the person's head. He says, you're going in there. I said, yeah, I guess I am.
Were you scared about in regard to
You weren't going to get me in that building. Not voluntarily. We first cut all the power going in, and the damn thing didn't stop, just kept going on and on. It was locked into some sort of a loop through quantum realities, and the energies were just building and building and building, and my fear was getting higher and higher and higher. I wanted the worst way to get out of there. I didn't know if I was going to go up in a bright flash. There was all sorts of discharges taking place. I didn't know what I was going to run into. Because at that point, the whole system is run totally out of control. And it was like bedlam on that place. And then the radar tower was awful.
This was the end. So that's when they broke the connections, the computer was shut down, and its ability to create on its own ended. It became a very serious problem because they could not turn the whole station on again as it had been.
In August 12, 1983, that's when it crashed, and it just came. I felt like I was unplugged from a wall, like I had been an electric appliance that was plugged in, and all of a sudden someone unplugged me. That's the only way I can describe it. I felt everything I went cold, I went numb, I just felt like electrical energy just left me, and I'll never forget that.
I don't care if you believe it or you disbelieve it. Preston Nichols is a liar? No. I'm not a liar because I believe what I'm saying. Preston Nichols is reporting the truth? I believe it's the truth. All the government will admit is that the FPS-35 radar was being used for the FAA to guide airplanes in. The information I'm putting out, the yardstick was how many people that were involved reported the same thing. I did not put out anything that wasn't reported by more than 3 people. It's up to you. Whether you're going to believe it or you don't believe it, doesn't make any difference to me.
Will there ever be any hard evidence?
I doubt it.
Yeah, of course, because something like this, they would do everything in their power to cover it up.
Yep.
So, what would you tell the people who do believe? What should they do?
Take the information and grow with it. Knowledge is growth. Knowledge is power. Take it and use it. And use it for good. Well, although it was hellhole, it was probably one of the most dire projects ever done on this planet. I wouldn't, if you asked me, did I want to do it again? If I had to do it all over, I'd say yes. I learned a lot. It was pure avant-garde research, and I learned a lot. And it's my duty to basically take this information and apply it for apply it for good. If you want to call it that, good, whatever you want to call that. Which is for something constructive, not destructive. They're doing this for destructive to destroy the will of mankind. I would take the same information and make it constructive.
And the warfare that is going on this planet is unbelievable. You've got psychic warfare, you've got religious warfare, you have a lot of civilian people now that are under almost continuous attack. As they speak of in the Bible, the days where the souls of men will be sorely tried, very much so. Some will be able to hang on and keep themselves in the right direction and keep in with the light, others will not be able to. There will be a lot of, I would suspect, I'm not trying to make this as a prediction, but I would suspect when we get to those days will be a large number of suicides. Enough people will get their heads screwed on straight and realize what is going on and that they have control of the situation. If they wish to exert control, they will have the control. Civilization will not crumble and collapse as been predicted. It will survive, or it will change. It will have to. But people can change history. History is not cast in stone.
What I would say to everybody, whether they believe me or not, don't take my word for any of it. Do your own research and find out on your own. I can tell you what I know, but unless you understand it and experience it and research it, you will not be able to assimilate it.
Along with his wife Janet, Stewart formed a self-help educational program called Expansions. The philosophy behind Expansions proposes that an insidious alien lineage, disguised as human beings which they refer to as the Illuminati, has covertly enslaved the human race since its inception. The Swerdlows further claim that the Illuminati control our thoughts, partially by poisoning our food and water supply.
Nazi scientists knew that there were certain things, chemicals, that they could put in food and water and medication to dumb down the brain, damage the body, make the person weaker so that they could be more controllable. Things like fluoride, chlorine in the water, mercury and aluminum in your food. All these things, when you ingest them, basically create heavy metal toxins in your body. And after a while, you become like a walking antenna. You become almost metallic. You pick up the ELF and microwave signals and scalar waves that are transmitted from satellites and cell phone towers, etc., so that you're constantly available for programming 24/7.
The Swerdlows offer a solution for the Illuminati mind control in the form of metaphysical exercises and esoteric symbology that they claim will help build a psychic and physical resistance against the invaders. One of the many exercises consists of a series of symbolic flashcards published by the Swerdlows, where they intend the practitioner to memorize the symbols.
I feel like with religion, we've been taught to look outward for an answer, to look toward religion as providing an answer, whereas Stewart's work teaches you to look inward because that answer already exists within you or within your connection to God mind and that knowledge. They're helpful to me in many ways, different ways, and I keep them on me at all times because I've physically felt the difference between having them with me and not having them with me.
Well, for me, like, before I even came across Stewart's stuff, like, I was researching all kinds of stuff for a few years and sifting through stuff and pushing it aside and taking the bits I liked and looking for similarities. And I would always look for something that was similar, and if it matched, then I'd say, okay, well, that's probably a credible bit of information. And when I found Stewart's stuff, it just all lined up perfectly.
So today, America does remember the hundreds of men used in research without their knowledge and consent. And they were lied to by their government.
In 1995, a public hearing regarding the full disclosure of many of these experiments took place in Washington, D.C.
I'm Christy Nicola, born July of 1962, rendering me 32 years of age. I was a subject in radiation as well as mind control and drug experiments performed by a man I knew as Dr. Green. His objective was to gain control of my mind and train me to be a spy assassin. I was in what looked like a laboratory and there seemed to be other children. I was strapped down, naked, spread eagle, on a table, on my back. Whenever physically possible, I snuck into his office and found files with reports and memos addressed to CIA and military personnel.
What about acknowledging the facts? What about acknowledging the hard evidence that is there and saying, okay, well, something else is happening here. But the people that don't want to hear it, they get mad and they call you names and they, like I've seen all these interviewers do, and they storm out. They just don't want to accept it. But a lot of that stuff seems pretty obvious when you just do the work.
Well, there is so much mass programming out there that oftentimes people don't want to hear the truth. They want to stay living in whatever world that this nefarious group has created for them, and that's their choice. For me, I don't ever want to try and convince anybody. To me, that's like losing the war before you even start the battle. So all I do, and all Stuart does, is we help people to face what's inside of themselves, and then nothing can have power over them. What is considered nefarious really disappears, and what is considered nefarious really is simply just a teacher.
So you would never, like some religions, aggressively try and recruit people?
No, I don't believe in that. I never have, and I guess that's one reason why my business has grown a little bit more slowly, because I'm not out for sensationalism.
The ultimate goal of the Illuminati is complete domination and manipulation of all of existence. We live in a world of now over 7 billion people. The Illuminati, or those who could claim connection to Illuminati, are really just a few 100,000. So the odds are stacked against them. If everyone in the world rebelled against the Illuminati, they could be overrun in moments. What will happen to the human race? That's a very interesting question. If we retain, as a species, victimization mentality, and we allow tyrants and oppressors to take advantage and control us, then they will be successful. But I don't think a civilization can remain ignorant forever.
Hey, how do I know any of these could be possible? I think that we ought to focus on the things that we can prove, the things that we do have documents for, and get a couple of small victories first, and get the rest of the global society on board and saying, hey, wait a second, all of our governments are hiding terrible atrocities from us. And if we're able to find these few small things and get a victory with them, I have a feeling that once you dig deeper and you're able to remove the villains from power, you're gonna find a lot more answers.
People have a tremendous appetite for conspiracy. On the one hand, it's fun to believe that there is this adventure happening behind the scenes. And on the other hand, some people are terrified by it because they feel disempowered. They feel that they are pawns in someone else's game, and that there is a deeper, darker reality that overshadows their life and in many cases influences their life.
It's a puzzle. All these things like Camp Hero, they are giant puzzles because there were so many people involved, and the stories became more and more outlandish, that became more convoluted. So you have to find as many credible pieces of something and see if those pieces attach to each other. When I interviewed one of our original astronauts, Gordon Cooper, during the interview, Cooper said to me, well, there are experiments going on involving time travel. And I remember going, what? He says they think that they could work it out eventually where a human passenger could go ahead in time into the future, but they don't know if they can figure out how to bring him back. So I said to Gordon, well, who would be dumb enough to agree to do that, to take a one-way trip of that kind? And he, very deadpan face, looked at me and said, you're looking at him.
I know for a fact that the government was keenly interested in what later became known as remote viewing. We had visitation to our research lab numerous times by the CIA, by the NSA, by DARPA, by the Office of Naval Intelligence. It was a single blind condition. They were brought in. We were given targets to locate through this remote viewing process, and we got such specific information. We were describing details of the Trident sub being developed and their missiles and the guidance technology that the audio tapes we produced while they were there were so, I guess you'd say, informative and invasive that they demanded that we surrender the tapes to them, which we did. The funding for remote viewing was through the federal government. They did tremendous amount of work clinically demonstrating and proving and validating, yes, it is possible to see things at a distance, to observe things ahead of time and backwards in time, and to perhaps even act upon them. The intelligence community has pressured and manipulated the media, the print media and television and movies, to lie to us about what's really going on. Why? Because it's the most classified subject in the history of humanity. We're dealing with technology that could change the course of human evolution, that would upset the notion of who we are, where we came from, and where we're going to.
When you've weeded out all the good stuff from the bad stuff, you are left with a small percentage of UFO-related events, not just in the United States, but all over the world, that is a signal that there is something going on that points to the idea that we're not alone in the universe, and we should be told.
It's not a far-fetched concept to imagine that people were kidnapped and brought to Montauk. If we look at the world, such things are happening all the time. It is almost a constant of humanity or human experience that the weaker are being exploited by the stronger. And so it's not too difficult for me to imagine that individuals or people or groups are willing to take advantage of the weak and defenseless. And which one of us is more defenseless than a young child?
Almost at the moment that I was ready to write my final hypothesis, I was contacted by a man who claimed that he too was a victim of the Camp Hero mind control. Mr. James Bruce, as he requested to be called, is a family man and former member of the U.S. military. He explained to me that he was recruited into an ongoing version of the Montauk Project that began when he was in kindergarten and lasted to this very day.
They would put us into class in kindergarten and we would put puzzles together, and whoever took the longest or whoever couldn't, some kids couldn't even put puzzles together. When they found that you did do good at putting the puzzles together, they would walk up to you and they would go, "Oh, we got a winner. Here's a winner right here." They were looking for kids with psychic abilities. They were looking for kids that would keep their mouths shut. They were looking for kids that would be assassins, good with their hands, good soldiers. I mean, it's going to sound crazy. All this shit's going to sound really crazy. It's going to sound felonious, but this is all the truth, and this is how it went down. So if I changed it in any way, it wouldn't be the truth.
Tell me exactly how you know it.
So this is what happened. So now,
I interviewed James for 3 hours, and he told a variety of bizarre stories that he claimed were entirely true. One story in particular, James explained that in his late teens, he was abducted by an imposter disguised as his father, who later met with Al Bielek for a series of experiments at Camp Hero.
he pulls up, and I think it's my father, and which I believed it was. And I got in the car with him and everything, and my friend's father goes, "That's not your father." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" "That's my father right there." He's yelling, "Get in the car! Time for you to go home!" And he just like him, everything like, you know. And then I looked and I said, "Isn't he?" And I said, "No, man, same car, looked just like, you know, he's my father." So he goes, "I'm telling you, don't go with him, man. That's not your father." I get in the car and I go, and he goes, I go, "Where are we going?" "We're going to Montalk. We're going to take a ride." So I'm still crashed out. I said, "All right, I'm going in the back seat." I'm sleeping in the back seat. I'm like, "All right, whatever. That's a long drive. Good, I'll go back to sleep." So anyway, he goes, "Well, we got to go meet somebody first." And that's when he picked up Al Bielek. And Al Bielek took us to Montauk, and we pulled in. It was in the middle of the night.
You drove up to Camp Hero?
Yeah, right up to Camp Hero.
And was there an entrance to go in?
You walk through a trail. I can show you right where it is to this day. It's even right in the part where you can see. It's a bunker, metal one, with a little doorway, and then when you go in though, it's got another doorway that comes out the side. And then what they did is they took the chair out from underground, and they had brought it up to a top layer. So they had to hook up all the computers to it again. And that's what he did when we were there. He hooked all the computers up back to it. They had it running, they got it running again. They go, "Well, we want you to get in this chair right here." And I said, no, I'm not getting in that fucking chair. And they're like, "No, well, we want you, come on, you gotta help us out, you gotta help us, you gotta do something. It's important to get in the chair and just lay down. Everything's gonna be all right." And I was like, "No, I'm telling you right now." And they go, "Well, we're gonna make you get in there then." And they grabbed me, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, one guy, Al grabbed my one arm, and my father grabbed the other arm. Well, anyway, when they grabbed me, I couldn't even move either arm. My father took his hand with like a razor and went like this around his neck, and ripped like this, and pulled his fucking face off like this. Pulled his whole fucking face off, and then he put it back on. put it back on. And I was like, what? Now what that makes me think that was Hollywood. That was their ways of, that whole person wasn't even my father. It was all a Hollywood
Were they giving
stunt.
you drugs at the time?
No drugs. No drugs at all.
So
no drugs at all.
This is something that you just saw right
They
before.
can't have you on drugs and you can't go through the chair right, really. Or you could die. People are dead from this in mental institutions right now from this. That went crazy, hung themselves. The government killed a lot of people too. Everything that you ever were taught in school, or everything that you believe to be real that's going on in this country right now is a complete lie.
I returned to Camp Hero once again. I encouraged James to locate the hatch that he claimed Alfred Bielek took him to for the experiments. The wooded path that led to this location was a short distance from the main entrance of the base, and it was also a place that in the entire 5 years of my investigation I hadn't yet known of or visited.
Wow. Wait a second.
I remember exactly where it was.
So this is where Al Bielek took you.
Well, yeah, this is the bunker, yeah.
Hold on. There's a lot of thick thorns and stuff over here. So underneath this concrete, you're saying there's a hatch that leads down to a room?
You see over here, there's a whole bunker over here. Come here, look. We're on top of it, actually. Look.
Almost 6 years after I began my investigation, I stared deep into the structure before me, and one singular image came to my mind. It's the one image that I feel my investigation is tantamount to. An endless road bordered by a dark forest on both sides. I'm left with a total enigma. I can't confirm if Mr. James Bruce or any of the subjects of this documentary are telling the truth. A full official confirmation would require solid analytical proof. It would require a corpus delicti, tangible technological evidence, and it would require the evidence that sound minds have unanimously agreed would confirm its existence. What we're left with are unanswered questions, and an investigation that's still open.
Why would anybody just come out of nowhere and just start making this shit up? That's what I would want to say. You're going to see, one day you're going to see, I don't know if it's going to be in our lifetime, but people will see, and they're going to dig everything up, and they're going to find bones. They're going to find bodies.
This is at Montalk.
At Montalk, you're going to find bones. It's going to look like the catacombs in France. To me, I always thought they were going to come and kill me because I knew too much and all this other shit, and it took me a lot to even go this far right now.
So what would you, what
would you know if I'm doing the right thing now even, so. I wish somebody would have spoken to me and let me know, more if I'm doing the wrong thing right now. If this is wrong in their eyes, I wish they would have come to me and spoke to me. And that's what tends to make me think even more so that maybe they want me to do this interview. Or maybe they want this to come out.
The lone puzzle piece. The MacGuffin of our story remains an undiscovered truth. If there are secrets that lurk beneath the soil of Camp Hero, they were never intended to be easily revealed. If the Montalk tales are, in fact, real, the forces that inspired them have and will continue to go to great lengths to make sure the stories exist solely as legend. A legend that's designed to conceal the truth. Curious investigators will continue to search these grounds and tell their tales by campfire. The stories will change and evolve in the years to come, until the truth is found. The ghosts of Montauk will haunt our imagination.
It was just a few miles from here. It was late in October. The stars were burning bright in the sky, and the chill was in the air, much like tonight.
I've heard many stories like the one that happened at that base, the Camp Hero, and some say that to this day, it's all still happening.